I choose the YouTube is before I was doing this things, and people hacked me earlier,
Oh,
and they been nasty. They put on a porn site on
really?
top of it. Really, that's how nasty people become nowadays. But on YouTube, nobody can interfere.
Right. Well, that's horrible.
Very horrible.
Was that using Zoom?
Zoom,
Just
yes.
Zoom.
I reported to the Zoom. I said, look, I'm paying money. I am the host. How can someone can do that to me? And
Yeah, that's awful. Are we going to record this, or would you, or do we not record these? Probably best. Well, what's your common practice?
Mike, indeed, I'll record. I'll record as well. I'll record as well.
Okay.
Uh, my common practice is just so I'll have echo. Let me get the, let me sort out the YouTube. We are live now. Let me get the. Oh, alhamdulillah. I have just 9 minutes to do everything. I will send you the link as well if you want to send to the people. You
Oh, right. Okay.
did I send you?
Yes, I've got it. Thank you. I'll.
Now I'm sharing these 6 minutes to many people who are on standby for me.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll put it on the Discord.
Okay, I have 5 minutes
Mhm.
to put everything in place. Forward to autism group. Testing, does it work? I'm asking my friends. Just they will tell me here.
Okay.
So I need to be everything goes well then on the dot. Testing. The voice and everything is good. Thank you. Yes. Abdurrahman Hersi, you are my director. I'll check on you on here. Let me know if things are go up or down or whatever. You are our editor. Thank you, Abdurrahman. Thank you. Good one. All right, let me share with many people who are expecting me to share with. Okay. Testing everything these 3 minutes. If everything is okay, people let me know. What else I needed to do? Good. 3 minutes. Three minutes to go.
Okay.
Oh, I'm the one who's timing himself. I don't want to put pressure on you, Andrew. Thank you.
That's all right. I've just sent the link to the Discord server for the Autism Experts by Experience group. So, I mean, whether any of them see it, I don't know, but maybe they will.
No, but the thing will be there for enough time anyway. So I'm expecting some parents might be busy with the kids, but once it is there, it's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
See it, I don't.
And I ask everyone who thinks this is benefit, please feel free to share with anyone who you think might benefit, especially the parents with autistic children. That's my advice. And without a further ado, we will be starting on the dot. 2 minutes to go. Yes, I still have one more group to send to. Thank you very much. And Alhamdulillah, shukr Rabbil Alameen. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويحفظ قولي ولساني. Yes. It is on cloud, and I can send you directly, Andrew, so you can download as well.
Okay.
From there. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be on you, all our listeners. This program is one of our programs that we continue doing, the real autism small charity. And one of the things we make sure that we do is to make programs like this. And the programs like this help us to talk to always expert by experience. Professor Andrew Hugill really is one of those people who I have the more respect, because without their guidance, we, the parents, will be lost. And he has got a lot to offer. And without asking any payment, today he's here to share with us his experience. He has long history. I won't go his biography a lot. He's retired professor. He's composer. He has a lot of things that are going, but my questions will come out and we ask some of the works that he's doing now. To make sure that we stick on the time, I'll start a warming up question. Andrew, you were diagnosed late, as you told me. Before the diagnosis, how was your life? And as much as you can tell us from early age.
Yes, well, of course, it's an enormous question in many ways. I'll try and pick out the kind of crucial features, but I do recall very young experiencing many of the kind of issues that I imagine a lot of your audience will be familiar with, particularly sensory and social issues. I was quite an unusual child in many ways, so to give you an example, one story that my mother used to tell was that when I was 3 years of age, she said, I always slightly doubt that figure, more like 4, I would think, but anyway, my grandmother pointed to all the birds on the lawn and said, "Look, Andrew, at all the lovely dicky birds playing on the lawn." And I responded to my grandmother by rattling off their Latin names, their breeding habits and migratory patterns, and the colours of their eggs. And everybody was rather sort of amazed. What it was I had learned the Observer Book of Birds. So I had what they call an eidetic memory or a photographic memory. So I could visualize one page of this little book of birds, and I could match the bird to the picture and then read the information. And so my brain always worked like that, and it caused quite a few problems for me, I have to say. People thought that I was trying to be different, as they put it. So I do remember being punished quite a lot for difference, and finding it very hard to understand what was going on in the world. And I guess that's what led me to music. So yes, I think I was aware of being different from a very early age, but of course I had no idea what you would call that. And at the time, I mean, an autism diagnosis was almost unheard of. It was known, autism, but it was very rarely diagnosed. So I lived my whole life that way, and ended up getting diagnosed in 2018 at the age of 60, and then suddenly understanding lots and lots of things from my past and why they happened the way they did. And it was really a great moment, a moment of relief and forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and understanding of the challenges that I had, but also understanding of the challenges that my parents had and my family. You're on mute, I think, Hashim, or at least I can't hear you.
Yes, the reason I go on mute is that whoever is speaking, you or me, will have whole frame to make sure that everything goes well.
Right.
Thank you very much. You were very late diagnosed at the age of 60. How did that realization change where you understand your own creativity? Just relate to that after you got it, because some people, especially the young people now, who can feel that they're different, they still don't want to be diagnosed, or at least after they diagnosed, they don't want to talk about it. So just what makes you think the way you think now after 2018?
Yeah, well, in terms of understanding my own creativity, I now observe themes and approaches that have always been there, but I never really understood why they were there. So particularly attention and focusing closely on specific things and building structures around those specific things. Using constraints and systems a great deal, which I've always done in my composition, but I've never really understood exactly why. And I think now I understand that it's actually just a manifestation of the autism, you know. So there's an autistic mindset that is very focused, highly focused on detail. This idea of monotropism, I don't know if you've heard that word before, but the idea that you're focused on a single thing and you have a very intense focus on that thing. And it's very hard to jump out of that focus and consider something else. And this is often what causes problems for autistic people and children in particular, is if you're focused on one thing and you suddenly have to move to another thing. And it's that rupture of focus. So I've used these systems and constraints and attention to detail as really a way of getting into a flow state for composition, and that's something that I've always done. And it's interesting because there were some interviews done with me back in the 1990s by someone who's now a presenter on BBC. And these interviews, when I read them now, I can see that I'm trying to express autism, but I just don't have the language for it. So I'm trying to explain to this interviewer how I approach composition, and the words that I'm using aren't adequate to describe what's going on. And of course, now with autism, I mean, I've just done it using words like monotropism and flow. We have concepts that help you to articulate what was going on. And so that, I think, has been a great benefit of the diagnosis. I've been able to harness that framework, if you like, to understand my creativity better.
Thank you. So you benefited by answering and getting answer all the questions you had before, and use your creativity and channel it well. Those who did not hear your first talk, I know that there are many of them in here as well. You also have difficulties, especially the one that you talk about in your traveling, when you're traveling. Can you talk a bit of your challenge and how you cope?
Yeah. Okay. So I have quite a lot of challenges actually, which is kind of funny because I'm a professor. I'm used to speaking to large numbers of people, going to conferences, that sort of thing, and you would think that that I should be fine, but actually I do have difficulties, and I use one in particular, which is airports. as an example. And I mean, there are many other situations where I have challenges, but airports are a particularly strong one. And I don't fly much. I don't actually mind flying. I'm not bothered by flying in an airplane. It's the airport that is the problem. And so the issues that I have are all to do with the environment. And I think this is true for all autistic people. The environment is crucial to how you feel, how you react, what problems you experience. So I would say autism plus environment equals outcome, to quote Luke Bearden. So an airport is a particularly hostile environment as far as I'm concerned. And what I'll do is I'll just run through a few of the things that cause me a problem in an airport, and perhaps people will recognize some of these. So first of all, you have an enormous space, and I can't see the corners of the space. So when I can't see the corners of a space, I then lose a sense of myself, of where I am. And in my own mind, I turn into a kind of a blob. I don't really know physically where I am in that space. And this, as you can imagine, is quite disturbing. The next thing is there's a lot of bright, shiny surfaces everywhere, a lot of signs, information, noise coming in, and of course, lots of people. So lots of input, sensory input. And one of the things about being autistic is that it's very hard to filter out things. So everything competes for attention, and you can't necessarily separate out what should have your attention and what shouldn't have your attention. And so when you've got too many things coming in, too much attention seeking, it becomes overwhelming, and you start to really struggle. I have a big problem with smells, and in most airports there are shops, and the first thing you encounter usually is a perfume shop, and of course lots of people also are wearing perfume, and that gives me great problems. My hearing is quite a complicated mess, not partly to do with autism, but actually due to a hearing condition that I have as well. But I do have a big problem with lots of sounds, and particularly loud noises, unexpected noises. So those will cause me a problem. And then there's the demands in an airport. So people have rules that they're following, and I don't always understand what those rules are. Even if people explain them to me and I understand them intellectually, I don't actually deep down understand them. All I can tell is that there's a lot of rule following going on, and I'm not sure I'm getting it right. And this particularly applies in situations like security. When you go through security in an airport and you have to take off your clothes or part of your clothes, you have to hand over your bag and open it up. So all of your personal world is being invaded, and then people are making demands, stand there, walk through this arch, do this, do that, do this. And all these demands come in on me, and I find it impossible. And what happens then is that I end up unable to move, unable to speak, and just I kind of internally implode, if I can put it like that. And I often feel quite very ill and start to get nauseous and that sort of thing. So what do I do to get around this? Well, what I can tell you what I used to do and what I do now. What I used to do before I was diagnosed was I used to go to multi-faith prayer rooms, because those were the only places in airports where I could get some peace. Now, I'm not a person of faith. I had no religious belief at all. But so I did feel like a bit of a fraud going into these places. But at the same time, there was nowhere else for me to go. And they did give me some relief. And I think these days, people are starting to include quiet rooms in public spaces, which is great. And I'm doing a lot personally to encourage that in consultancy work and so on. So that was what I used to do. what I do now is I get disability assistance. Now, this gets a bit controversial because I can walk, I can function, and yet I feel I need somebody to go through with me and say, stand here, do this now, and so on. And I always end up explaining to the person who's seeing me through what I need from them. Because, of course, they look at me and I think, well, what's your problem? You know, you've got people in wheelchairs who clearly need the assistance. And then there's me. And it feels very awkward and uncomfortable, but not nearly as bad as not having the disability assistance. So I think if people are struggling with travel, I would certainly recommend seeking disability assistance if you're autistic. I found them generally very good. Other strategies, a lot of airports and other major transport hubs will provide video walkthroughs of their situation, so you can actually go do a kind of a preliminary walkthrough on a video of the whole space. And I find that helps a lot to reduce anxiety. You know, if you turn up and you don't know what you're going to expect. And when I say what I'm going to expect, I'm talking about actual literal things, you know, the colors of the desks, the patterns on the walls, the patterns on the carpets. These all matter to me. Any symmetries and asymmetries, who's likely to talk to you, because, you know, I find it difficult if some stranger starts talking to me. I'm never quite sure how to react. So who's going to talk to you? What are they going to ask for? What's expected of you? People are providing video tours of this now, and that is a great help. I can't think of anything more off the top of my head. I hope, does that answer your question, Hashim?
Yes, it does, because one of the things that parents like me who have non-verbal children, it helps to understand why my son behaves a certain way in airports, and knowing that I can now check this walkthrough links of some airports have for him to understand exactly what to expect before he flies. So that's a good tip, because he couldn't tell me what it is that I need to, except showing him the picture of the airplane that we will be flying and all that. Thank you very much.
So maybe I could just add as well that you know, for an autistic person, you don't always know exactly what the problem is. You just know there's a problem, you know. But if somebody says to you, "What's the matter?" it's very hard to explain what the matter is. It's like a deeply unsettling feeling, and so I imagine for kids, you know, often they're not able to understand themselves exactly what the problem is. So there's a lot of sort of trial and error involved in this. But your approach of having your son watch these video tours would be very good, and it'd be interesting to know then if that improves the experience for him and for you. You know, yeah.
Thank you. I will check and ask other parents to check those videos for because we are now in the middle of preparing everyone for holidays and things like that. So it will be easier with you. And a good tip. Thank you. That's why people like you always give us advice. The other thing that I learned today not learned today, but learned on my skin was I used to provide food in events where autism events are happening, like the one that happened on 18. And one day, one of the attendants couldn't keep the taste, not the taste, the smell of the food. And he was so much agitated.
Yeah.
And then when I took him out, he told me what was the problem. And from that day now, whatever it is that I'm doing, I will be not serving food exactly where the people are sitting, because I have to also, I learned the hard way that the smell can upset someone who's And he was one of the speakers, by the way, and he couldn't speak that night because of my ignorance on the matter. So
yeah.
it is very good.
Very good.
Thank you. You explained that you used your strength in becoming who you are today, which is composer, which is a professor. What was that journey? How an autistic person, when they find out their niche, what it is that they can do to make it a, a living cost where they can at least maintain themselves. Because the reason I ask this question, we have many youngsters who we only look into their challenges rather than what they are good at it.
Yeah. This is so important, and I mean, I'm very conscious that I've been fortunate in the sense that I've come from a relatively well-off background, but at the same time, I still ended up living on the streets in London, and there was a failed suicide attempt when I was young. You know, the difficulties are enormous. And I think I probably said in my talk, I've never successfully interviewed for a job, actually, because the interviews are so impossible. So all the work that I've done, I've done because somebody has invited me in and said, we want you, we want what you can bring, which has been, gratifying in many ways, but getting to that situation has been an enormous struggle. And I credit autism with my ability to do it, because what autism does is it gives you a certain grim determination. You do things in a certain way, and you do it that way, and the rigor with which you do it, and the persistence and the determination with which you do it, eventually impresses itself on somebody somewhere, and the result is you get a job. And then for me, I mean, what could I do? I'm completely unemployable, apart from when I have something that I'm interested in. I'm really, really interested in it. I mean, deeply, deeply interested, to a level that other people generally are not. And so I find myself, becoming an expert on something if I'm interested. And that expertise is what gives me the advantage. So what I would recommend to anybody who's got a child who is autistic and wondering what's this child going to do in life, I would say let them explore their special interests, or whatever term you want to use for the things that interest them, because they will have them, and some of them might seem quite ridiculous to you, but believe me, they will lead somewhere ultimately if you allow that interest to flourish. And I think there's a tendency brought about partly by education, partly by society in general, that a child should be well-rounded and should have a wide range of activities and interests, and get on with everybody, or get on with people, be able to, for autistic people, this is hopeless. You'll never be a well-rounded person like that. What you will be is very, very knowledgeable about a certain thing. I mean, the alarming thing about it is you can't actually choose what you're going to be interested in. I mean, I've got a current fascination that I've had for 30 years or more in frogs. I've made the frogs into music. I've got this piece, Frog Fizzles. It's all about frogs. I've written pieces in the past that were used frog calls, and it's just been a constant interest to me. It's not something I've ever done academically. I haven't become a herpetologist or joined some biology department. So it's a kind of amateur interest, but it's very pervasive, and it affects everything that I do. And I still think it offers benefits, to me. So yeah, my message would be encourage the interests that they have, and try to foster and develop those as much as possible, whatever the interests might be.
Thank you very much. Because when the parents, I come back always to that point. We're eager to get overwhelmed in the challenges we see, and we often miss the good bits of the children.
Yeah.
My next question is that in your previous talk, you always not struggle but see differently when it comes to social norms, whether if someone is colleague or friend, you couldn't, and
Yeah.
you will be direct to the people. That bit of your talk attracted many attention.
Right. Interesting.
So can you tell us a bit more about your direct approach of the things, people that you see, and your honest feedback, how it affected your career?
Yeah. Well,
As much as you can tell us.
it's been both, like everything about my autism, it's been both a blessing and a curse. It's got me into a lot of trouble on occasions. I've sent emails to the vice chancellor that I shouldn't have sent, ill-advised communications, expressing my view forcibly about some matter on which I felt strongly, and I've been upbraided by the vice chancellor in his office because of that. But that same directness and honesty has led the same vice chancellors to appoint me to become director of research institute and to promote me and so on. So it's a bit of this, and it's got some good sides and it's got some not so good sides. I think the social norms thing is not being able to distinguish between friendship and professional colleagues. That this kind of thing is I suspect very typical of autistic people. You just don't know, and you assume that if you go out after work, for example, and have a drink in the pub or wherever with colleagues, that they're then your friends because you're now doing something out of the office. And then it turns out, no, actually, that's part of the office after all, but you just didn't realize. I have big problems with body language. I've studied body language a great deal because, like most autistic people, I'm trying to figure out what on earth is going on. And I can't say I really understand it. What I do think is that non-autistic people lie with their bodies all the time. So they give you an impression with their bodies which is different from the reality, and that I find very difficult to understand and accept. Um, eye contact, similarly, I've learned how to appear to make eye contact. I'm very good at it. So people think, if anything, they say, "Oh, you're a bit starey. You stare too much." They think I'm making eye contact, but I'm not actually. I'm looking at a spot just above their eyes, but they don't realize. So it's those kinds of social conventions, chit chat, casual conversation. I try and join in, and some of the time I pass off pretty well. Some of the time I don't. Often when I sort of talked about my diagnosis, some people said, "Well, you don't seem autistic," which is a very common thing. I mean, basically, if you're autistic, you're either not autistic enough or you're too autistic. You can't win. So, so they look at me and they say, "Oh, well, you don't seem autistic," and then I say, "Well, you haven't seen me in an airport. Then you have exactly the opposite view. So it cuts both ways. That it's very very difficult. But yeah, I just think I've studied the way people interact hard in my life in order to try and fit in with those people, and I still find myself to this day being challenged and accused of all sorts of things. I mean, it happened to me a few months ago. People just suddenly find me very difficult for whatever reason, and I usually don't understand what the problem is.
Thank you. And because one of the things that I learned today is that the eye contact, the way that you're masking it, not eye contact, but eye contact to us. That's a good one. The other thing is that especially the boys, male, let me put it that way, are not good at it, but the girls, they always try to fit in. So knowing that you have done some fitting in and try to mask, it was good. The other thing is that when you are in overwhelmed,
Yes,
in whichever way, and uncomfortable, uh, it is that period how you, not you manage, but how you wanted people to help you if they want to help you. Because what I find out is when my son is in meltdown in a public place, everybody tries to run to you, which exacerbate the problem,
yeah,
and gives you a lot of unwanted advice. Are
yeah,
you dealing with the public? Are you dealing with your son? Sometimes, so is someone like you who talks, what it is that when you are that situation overwhelmed, what we, the public, the others, want us, what you want us to do, if
yeah.
I make sense.
Okay, so let's just be clear, first of all, that something that's uncomfortable is okay. It's uncomfortable, but it's manageable. But when you're overwhelmed, your whole system just stops working. So you can't speak properly, you can't really think. Everything just becomes too much, and it's very hard in that moment to try and explain to people what you need in that situation, because by then you're beyond that. And really, the key to it is not to allow that to arise in the first place. And it's a bit like something that's filling up all the time. Like if you imagine a bottle that's filling up with liquid all the time, and if you keep adding a bit and adding a bit and adding a bit, eventually it will spill over the top, right? And that's the moment is when it's spilled over the top. What you need to do is find ways of emptying the bottle before the spillage starts to happen. So it's usually earlier in the day that you could have averted the situation. And generally, I think with autistic people, what they want most is to be left alone, just to allowed to regather themselves, find a quiet space, do the thing, whatever it is that they're doing, Pokemon Go, or I don't know, fiddle. I always have one of these fidgets, whatever it may be that you're doing that enables you to self-regulate. If there's plenty of time for that earlier on, it can usually stop a problem later. Unless you get to some kind of totally overwhelming situation like an airport where it becomes, I mean, it doesn't matter how much preparation you have, there's nothing that can stop you being overwhelmed in that situation. So I think for most autistic people, it probably means the best thing you can do is get them to a quiet area and leave them alone, and just let them know that they're safe in that area and they can do what they want to do and be what they want to be, and eventually it will pass. I mean, obviously, there are very different degrees of this. So there are people who self-harm in these situations. They start damaging themselves, damaging objects, becoming violent. This does happen. So for that, I mean, it becomes even more challenging because obviously if you're in a public place, there's a danger to people and to themselves. So I think really trying to prevent that situation in the first place is the key, rather than trying to deal with the meltdown when it's happening. Because a meltdown, it's like I say, you've lost control. Basically, you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. It's hard to explain if you've never had one yourself, but it's just completely takes you over. You have no control, and you know that it's wrong and bad, and you feel ashamed, but there's nothing you can do about it. You're muted again, Hashim.
Good, because I'm doing it for the frame. I would want people to see you whole, so that I always mute myself. The other thing is I'm alternating now. Your creative way. You have described autistic perception is often intense and detailed. How does this directly shape your processing and composing as a music composer? So you see, you turn your autistic thing to music composing. So how does that comes? Because one of the things that we miss with the children in general who are growing up now, who only see the shortcoming of the autism, but don't see that strength. Just if you can explain more about how you use that into composing and making a career out of it.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating question, and obviously it's a vast answer, because I've written a lot of music over an entire career. I've had a lot of commissions from orchestras, from the BBC, I've been played around the world. So I think the first thing is that my work's shaped by attention, focusing on specific things and building structures around them, and using constraints and systems. So I'll try and give you a couple of examples to just describe them, to hopefully explain how this works. There was a piece I wrote in 1980, which was a very simple piece. It was for piano, and there's a little phrase, a 2-bar phrase, and then another phrase that's almost the same that follows it. And what I did was simply that the initial phrase is played, and then you have silence, and then you have the initial phrase again, but with one note removed, and you have one note from the second phrase heard in the silence, and then 2, and then 3, and so on, so that the two fragments of music, which are quite similar to one another, kind of pass one another in the night, as it were, and eventually you arrive at the second phrase, and there's silence beforehand. So there's a process that you can almost hear, although it's actually quite difficult to tell exactly what's going on. But there's a system at work there. But then another approach is more linked to my interests. So, for example, I wrote a piece called Catalogue of Frogs, Catalogue de Grenouille, and I've mentioned frogs before. This was again in the 80s, which was a piece for hundreds of frog recordings and ensemble. And this piece, by the way, was played on radios 1, 3, and 4 in the same week, which was my biggest claim to fame, I think. But that piece was all united by my interest in a French writer called Jean-Pierre Brisset, who had this crazy theory that man is descended from the frog. And he proves this theory by using puns in French. So little phonemic cries like quoi and pourquoi. And he builds up whole phrases and sentences from these little frog-like calls and creates meaning out of them. And I just love this kind of sideways on way of thinking about frog calls. So that's another approach, is the what you might call the conceptual background. And then a piece like Frog Fizzles, which uses technology, so it's very much a web-based piece. Anybody can do it. And this is something that I'm still working on, but it's live, it's active, and you can do it yourself. And it basically takes a frog as a kind of a score, and you interpret the frog, and there are instructions on how you can do that I've written that you can then interpret, and you do it for yourself. So it's not for any musician. You don't have to be a trained musician. Anybody can do it. It's not for public performance. It's a private thing, and you can just do it for fun, So I quite like that as well. These kind of works that aren't formal concert works as such, but nevertheless have this kind of musical communication. So you'll have gathered from all of that that what I don't do is write pop music. I don't write rock music. I don't write, commercial music. I have written symphonies and quite big choral pieces. So I've done works for large ensembles, but yeah, I'm not a commercial composer. I do it for the art, basically. Anyway, does that answer your question, Hashim? It's such a vast question that I'm not sure that I've done it justice, really. But anyway.
No, you did, because one of the things that make me happy is that it's something that you have that uniqueness in progressing, and then you turn into profession, or into continuous making music for others, and you've been. One other thing that I like to go back is you founded a creative computing program in the past for students, because I know that many students are struggling first year of university, second year of university, and sometimes they're very shy due to the stigma surrounding the autism or special needs, if I may put it that way. This program, which is it makes genuinely inclusive for autistic students and college. Can you tell us more about this program? It seems very important for parents like me and other parents who are listening today.
So tell you about the creative computing program in particular.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a program. I actually did this twice. Once at Bath Spa University and once at University of Leicester. And they're somewhat different, the two programs, but they're both still active. And it's a way of a different take on the traditional computer science degree, where the arts and humanities are injected into everything that you do. So you do learn programming, you do learn those basic technical skills, but you're always applying them in a creative way. So the idea is to develop creativity, and this is why it becomes accessible for people, I think, in that you are expected as a student to come up with an idea. The traditional way of teaching computer science is that you're given 2 years of technical grounding, and then you do a final project that's written by a member of staff, right? So you have to complete an assignment that is very challenging. In creative computing, it's rather different. We don't have exams. We don't. Instead, what we do is we encourage the students to develop an idea or a set of ideas. It doesn't have to be just one, and we then enable them to realize those ideas. And so it's that kind of artistic approach to computing that it makes this distinctive. As I say, there were 2 universities. At Bath Spa, I don't know if people know that place, but it's really a liberal arts college, so it's very artistic already. And for them, the big novelty was having computing in their program, because they don't really have any traditional science. At Leicester, it's the other way around. Leicester's a traditional scientific university, and the computer science department is very strong. So the novelty for them was the introduction of creativity into what they were doing. And that I think it's true to say in both cases that both institutions found it quite challenging, what I was trying to do, but both embraced it. And as I say, the courses are still flourishing. And we have a high preponderance of students who are neurodivergent on those courses, and or a lot of autistic students who, by and large, do very well. I would say to students or potential students about the business of disclosure, because this is a very difficult personal decision that you have to take. Now, you've talked about the stigma of autism. What I would say is that the world has changed. Now, it's still got a long way to go. Don't make no mistake. There's still some stigma attached to being autistic. But I would urge you, if you do go to university and you're in any doubt, I would urge you to disclose your autism and take the support that's on offer from the university. I can speak from experience at Leicester in particular. I know they're extremely keen to do the right thing for autistic students. And if you don't let them that you're autistic and that you may have problems, they can't help you. You have to tell them. So whatever the stigma may be, I think it is worth disclosing. And the other thing I'd say is there are an awful lot of students who are like you, and dare I say, an awful lot of professors too, because it seems to me that being a professor is one profession where being autistic is clearly an advantage. A lot of my colleagues, I think, are autistic, even if they haven't been diagnosed. So, yeah, you'll find a lot of support and sympathy if you disclose. If you don't disclose, then really nobody knows what your problem is, and that makes it hard for them to help you. So I would recommend disclosure. And by the way, that's not something I would have said if you'd asked me that perhaps even 5 years ago. So that tells you, I think, that the world is changing, the attitudes are changing, at least in universities, maybe not in society at large, but certainly in universities.
Thank you very much. One of the things that whenever I talk to you, it gets me more because we are part of Autism Partnership here in Leicestershire.
Yes.
Fascinates me is I learn always, even though we talk or I see you talking in those meetings, new things. Now, you talk about when you were a child, your parents better off. Yet again, you went all to that difficulties. There are, and this is not your expertise, there are people now who claim to be expert of autism, and they are putting astray the parents like me, putting out a miracle cure or miracle medication and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
In your opinion, there are many parents here. I couldn't resist asking you this question. What is your advice? Because autism is what it is. You know more than us.
Yeah. Well, what I say first of all is autism doesn't change. My autism is the same now as it was when I was 3, when I first became aware of this difference that I was describing at the beginning. It hasn't really changed. I think I've changed. I've got older. I've got better able at dealing with things. I think, but since the diagnosis, some people have said to me, well, you're more autistic now than you used to be. And I think, well, is that because I know about it, or is it because I'm being more open with it? Maybe that's changed. But actually, when they say you're more autistic, it's wrong, you see. I'm not more autistic or less autistic. I just am autistic, but it is what it is, and it doesn't change. So anybody who tells you that they've got a cure, ignore them, because they haven't. There is no cure for autism because it's not a disease in the first place. It's a way of being in the world. And I think there have always been autistic people. I think there's evidence for them in Neanderthal society, let alone through the whole sweep of history. I'm actually writing a paper about this at the moment. And so, this idea that autism is some kind of condition that can be cured, it can't. I know in America particularly, there's a lot of interest in behaviorism and trying to adjust behaviors. And they claim some success in what they call applied behavioral analysis, ABA, where they're able to get an autistic child to behave more like a non-autistic child. And they do that by a classical system of punishment and reward. You behave well, you get rewarded. You behave badly, you get punished. And the punishments can be pretty horrible. Now, we don't really do that in this country, and I'm glad we don't. And the reason why I'm glad we don't is because actually all that's happening is you're suppressing the autism, which will find its way out eventually. And usually the results of this are incredibly damaging later on in life, you know, when you get to your teenage years and so on. These children who have had their behavior modified by these kind of crude methods are usually in trouble later on. And I'd say, you know, let's not forget that it was the Lancet, no less, that published an article claiming that autism was caused by vaccines. You know, the Lancet, the top medical journal. Okay, it retracted that and it's apologized and, you know, now refutes it completely. But, you know, the level of misinformation, psychology has done an enormous amount of damage as a discipline. People making careers out of autism, basically. So to give you one example, there's this thing called the theory of mind. Now, for a long time, it was assumed that autistic people don't have a theory of mind. In other words, they lack empathy. Theory of mind means the ability to understand what's in someone else's mind, you know. So the theory went, oh, well, autistic people can't work out what's in someone else's mind. They don't have that empathy. Therefore, they lack empathy. Therefore, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a very, very widely held belief and theory in this country and around the world until very recently. Uta Frith, you know, one of the early people who put forward that theory, recently wrote an article saying that the autism spectrum is broken. The diagnosis is meaningless now because there are too many people being diagnosed and all this sort of thing. This is all nonsense. I would reject it. And the fact that it's coming from well-respected sources doesn't make it right, you know. Science progresses slowly and by error. It makes assumptions, tests those assumptions. When it finds the assumptions are incorrect, it then makes a better assumption, and that's how it develops. And what you can't just accept an idea like theory of mind and say, well, that's solved autism, because it hasn't. You know, the lived reality of people like me will tell you something different. Yeah, that was a long answer, Hashim, and I drifted a bit. So hopefully that was interesting. Yeah.
No, that's music to my ears, because who better person to ask than experts themselves? I know many parents are now in a difficult position because people are linking the vaccinations to autism. Yeah. And I have seen many hesitant parents. I'm glad many of them are here today to listen directly from you, and trying to say, I'm not gonna. But what they don't know is that measles, mumps, and rubella are more dangerous than getting autistic or not autistic. So if you can spend a few minutes on that point, people who believe so much. You touched, I remember, about the Lancet and it is retraction and all that. But what advice you give those hesitant parents?
Well, I would advise them to get the vaccine. It's as simple as that. You know, my brother and I both had the same vaccines. My brother is not autistic, and I am. So, you know, I don't think that autism was caused by the vaccinations we had as children. So, you know, I think autism tends to run in families. It's very complex in terms of genetics. So there are hundreds of different what they call markers of autism. So it's not possible to say, oh, well, this is the gene that causes autism and we can fix that gene and there won't be any more autism. And I'm very pleased about that, because basically what that would be is eradicating people like me. You know, and I don't want to be eradicated. Thank you very much. So, you know, I think what we can say is autism is just a fact of life. There are autistic people. There have always been autistic people. There always will be autistic people, unless some eugenicist finds a way of eradicating us. Vaccination is a completely different thing. Vaccination is well, I mean, we don't have time to go through how vaccination works, but basically, it's not the case that if you vaccinate somebody, that the chemicals that put into you then cause some disorder in the brain. It just doesn't happen like that. I would get the vaccine. I can't really put any simpler than that. That would be my advice. Protect your child from measles, mumps, and rubella, which are terrible, terrible illnesses and can kill. And do so in large numbers, and we're seeing that happening right now. Yeah, autism. A lot of people think autism is a terrible thing, and that for autistic people is very distressing. I'd like to think that I'm not a terrible thing, that actually I'm worth having in the world, and that I can make a valuable contributions to society, and that being autistic doesn't make me into some kind of monster or aberration. And that's the implication of saying, oh, well, we don't want our child to be vaccinated because they might get autism, because that's worse than getting measles. I don't think it is. They're not equivalent things. So please get the vaccine, everybody. Please. I'm not a medical person. I have no vested interest in vaccines. I don't work for any drugs companies or anything like that. I'm just an autistic person and composer and musician, and I would say get the vaccines because they make sense, and they work.
You see, the time flies. Coming 5 minutes that we have.
Yeah.
I would like you to think of closing remarks for everyone, especially putting your weight around the parents, because I slipped my chance to ask you a personal question about how you become a husband and all that, but it's another time. But one of the things that they say people who are autistic have difficulty in finding partner. That's is it the perception of the rest of, or it is something that has kind of a bit of it is another question, but you're summing up. If you can answer that and throw anything else, and don't be constrained by time, please. Okay. It is music to our ears. You can have all day.
All right. Well, what I will say is that my wife and I met. It's quite true that autistic people find it difficult to form relationships. My wife and I met in 1995 on the internet, and at that time, the internet. This was before the World Wide Web. It wasn't like it is now with internet dating and all of that. She had built her own computer, and I was living on an island composing a symphony. And I used to finish work, and I would have a dial-up modem. People may or may not remember those, but they were very, very slow, right? And then I would end up in this virtual coffee house, and I would talk to the one woman who was on the internet, and we fell in love by text. We had no image of one another. We never met. And now, of course, looking back, I realized that was the only way I was ever going to form a relationship. I've always been hyperlexic. I read a great deal, and I read very fast. So text means something to me. Imagery doesn't. I never cared about what she looked like. It didn't bother me. Most relationships are formed by someone looking at someone and saying, "Oh, I like the look of you." Well, I could never understand what that was all about. It never made any sense to me. The visual cues, the social interactions where someone, gives you the eye or whatever, I never got any of that. But text, I suddenly found myself texting this woman who I'd never met. I didn't know where she was in the world. She could have been anywhere. And as it was, she was in Devon and I was in Cornwall, so we were quite nearby at the time. But that's how we met, and we talked for I think 6 months before we physically met. And when we physically met, it was just like a formality. It was like, okay, that's what you look like, right? When do you want to move in? So that's the story of our relationship. And she came with a son, so he became my stepson. And he never knew his father, so in a sense, I was a reasonable substitute. And it's been pretty great ever since. We've had a wonderful life and still do. So that's my personal story. It is very challenging for autistic people to form relationships. There's no doubt about it. I think I only did it because of that unique situation. And I think, of course, at the time, I didn't have the knowledge of being autistic, and nobody I knew what that was. So now we're in a very different situation. Children have diagnoses, and people know what autism is up to a point. So you have some way of being able to understand what the challenges are, and perhaps being able to create situations where autistic people have a running chance at forming a relationship. And it's certainly true. You've probably heard of this double empathy theory about, if you have autistic people talking to autistic people, they tend to communicate very well. And I find this. I've got a non-verbal autistic nephew, and yet I communicate with him extremely well by text message mainly. And I understand him much better than I understand some of my non-autistic relatives. My communication with him is a lot better. And so it's when you mix autistic and non-autistic, you tend to get problems with communication because the expectations of the one are different to the expectations of the other. Yeah. So I think often autistic people meeting other autistic people, things happen, and quite often people are stunned by the conversations that take place because they seem so different to the conversations that you would have with a non-autistic person. And they really are, they really are very different.
Thank you. Now, your closing remarks, because we are over the time, but it's music to our ears. Really, we couldn't get a better lecture than this. And concentrate always the parents.
It's all very improvised, but I'm glad it's going down well. I think I've got two short messages. One is autism is not a deficit to be fixed, but it's a different way of experiencing the world, and that's all it is. It is different. It is very different, but it is just a different way of experiencing the world. And the difficulties that arise lie in the gap between the person and the environment. So it's all about the environment. And if you get the environment right for the autistic person, it can make all the difference in the world, So attend to the environment, and you'll probably, in doing so, help the autistic person. That's it, really.
Thank you ever so much. And I hope if parents come back for more, you will be available for us. I do not have enough. I do not have enough words, not because I lack the language, but adjectives to define our gratitude and appreciation of your time. And thank you ever so much. You made our day. You made our day. And I can speak for the rest of the parents sitting here quietly wanting to ask you a lot of questions. I invite them to write to us, and then we will revisit it. Thank you ever so much for your time, and thank you for those who were watching us directly from YouTube. Now we